Hey there, I'm Jackie Ferris. This week on the 302, we are at Winterthur, but we are not at the main house. We are checking out the historical Chandler farm. It's a place you can't go unless you're watching the 302. Get ready, the show's about to start. If you've ever been to Winterthur, chances are you haven't seen it. But Chandler Farm is one of those gems that the 302 just had to explore. We're joined now by Carrie Greif, who is the estate historian, to tell us all about this grand home. So Carrie, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, thank you for coming.
So this is a beautiful home. Tell us a little bit about when it was built.
Yeah, so this home is called or referred to as Chandler Farms, and it's named after 8 generations of Chandlers that have lived and worked on this land since 1702 until it was purchased by the DuPonts in 1917.
That's amazing. When you talk about 8 generations, so when they started out, was the land as big, and how much land did it originally encompass?
Yeah, they purchased 200 acres for 60 pounds sterling originally, and the land size sort of fluctuated with different ownership of the land, so it changed over time.
So it went from one family to another family, just kind of passed down.
Exactly.
And were they always farmers, or did they do other things with the land?
Yes, the land was mostly a farm, almost exclusively, until the DuPonts purchased it.
Mm-hmm. So why was it that Mr. DuPont was interested in it?
I think most likely because it was adjacent to the Winterthur property, and they were expanding to accommodate the golf course. This was also at a time when Winterthur was building the creamery, and the dairy operation was expanding really quickly.
So it really fell under the umbrella of the preservation, I guess, desire theme that Mr. DuPont wanted to have for generations to come.
Yeah, and to maintain a lot of the precious vistas that we have here at Winterthur. That was certainly part of both the DuPont's visions.
So when this house was first built, what was life like on the farm?
So this house was built, the first 5-bay window portion, this is a 7-bay house, was built from 1804 to 1805. And we do have a decent sense of who was living on the farm at that time. There was a census in 1800 that accounts for 15 different residents, 5 men, 4 women, and 1 free person, which is pretty common in the Wilmington area. And while we don't know exactly what each of those different residents' role was on the farm, we do know that they were helping to harvest grain, work livestock, and the farm also had a pretty successful timber business at that time.
Mm-hmm. So they were very busy no matter what they were doing. So was it common with that many people? What was that, multiple families?
Yes, likely multiple families, and there were also probably other structures on the farm to accommodate them, but at this time we don't have any historical records.
Sure. So when you talk about the people that lived in the house, I mean, was this the kind of thing were they a wealthy family? Did they have people working for them on the farm?
Yeah, one of the things that I love about Chandler Farms is this was not the home of a gentleman farmer. Joseph Chandler, who was primarily responsible for the construction of this house, worked his entire life to have enough money to build this brick front home. He built this when he was around 40 years old. At that time, his son had just been married, Benjamin Chandler, and they needed to have space for their growing family, but this was really a culmination of a life's work for him.
So Benjamin Chandler, there's a lot of information about him and his wife, because they lived here, I guess, for a significant amount of time, right?
Yes, Benjamin Chandler was also an excellent record keeper, and in 1830 he sort of reworked some of the business practices on the farm, and that helped create a lot of additional revenue.
Sure, just a lot of really interesting historical facts. But the family sold the farm, but they continued to live here. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, they have the Chandler family has deep ties to Centerville. They were very active in their church community, and they put a lot of their money towards community development and preservation of the church in Centerville.
That's amazing. Thank you so much for spending time with us and talking about this. And when we return, we're going to talk a little bit about the design and the building itself. Stay with us.
Hi, this is Jen Bose from the Greater Wilmington Convention and Visitors Bureau. Be sure to watch the 302 for all the fun things there are to see and do in Delaware.
Welcome back. We are exploring the historic Chandler farm on the Winterthur property, and this is a place that you cannot go if you come to visit Winterthur. So this is a real treat for us. I'm joined by John Castle. He is the Director of Facilities. John, thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thank you for being here.
Let's talk a little bit about this building. It's undergone a lot of different phases in construction. What can you tell me about this building?
So it's not the original Chandler house. The original Chandler house was in the early 1700s when they bought the property, but later on in 1804 they started to build this. It was a 5-bay house, which if you recall, if you look at the house, there's 5 windows and rows of windows, and then they extended it a little bit further on. So the yellow pine floors that you see are original. The staircase and the stairway up to the third level is all the way up. That's original as well. The fireplaces are original. They're not in the original location, however.
Now, I want to talk about this stairwell that we are in right now, or foyer that we're in right now. This really speaks to the history of not just the Chandler farm, but to Winterthur.
It does. They've, in one of our renovations that we had with the directors, we put some photographs that were up on the wall that show the history. There's the history of Chandler Farm and Mr. and Mrs. Chandler. Mr. DuPont is pictured here, and some photographs of the early part of the museum as well.
Now, this is really kind of, just the way it's laid out, it's kind of historic in that this is the way it was done back in the day. It wasn't so, what is it, Etsy, collage-esque?
Well, it wasn't, it's hard to tell what the original design was because it has been chopped up over the years. The DuPont family put workers in here that worked on the DuPont farm, and then they kind of graduated into having the director's residence used to live here. So it's gone through a lot of renovations. There are some remnants of the original structure, but what the original footprint was, we really don't know.
It really is beautiful, and I know that you guys have been researching. You guys know about the paint that was on the walls, you know about the woodwork. I mean, that's a lot of research into this one beautiful building.
It is, and we're interested in doing that with all of our structures here. We have 118 buildings on the property, and we'd like to get the full story on all of them if we could.
That's amazing. So it must constantly be a voyage of exploration with these properties for you.
Well, as the director of facilities, it's just a constant maintenance problem is what it really is.
Yeah, seriously, I can imagine.
It's always something.
So we talked about this beautiful foyer. What's upstairs?
So there's a lot of bedrooms upstairs. There's 4 additional bathrooms, 6 bedrooms, and then the third floor is kind of another bedroom and bath, and a much larger space that's around the original fireplace location.
That must be really beautiful when you go up and just kind of check out the grandeur and the simplicity of it.
It is. It does have some Shaker references to it. If you go into the attic proper, the old original stairs to the Widow's Walk is still there, and that's kind of really fancy to go see.
Now, you mentioned that there's also a back, like a servant's stairs.
There is a servant's stairs. That's not this one. We're at the main family. But what's currently used as the laundry room, but was in the back servants by the kitchen, is another servant stairs that comes up on the back side of the house, so that the servants could still service the rooms and all that, but not have to use the main stairway.
Yeah, and everything's all modern and nice until you go down into the basement. What do we know about the original building when we go down there?
So we can see remnants of the original hand-dug well that's there. We can see some of the original log beams and hand-hewed logs that are down servicing or supporting the structure. There's an old wine cellar there that wasn't original to the house, was added much later, and some of the stonework that's there. It's pretty neat.
I bet. So whenever you're taking care of a property like this, I know that you just can't put any old shingle on a house like this or any old window. I mean, there are some modern things that you can do, but do you have to stay within certain guidelines whenever maintaining a place like this?
We do, especially here at Winterthur. We work very closely with Carrie, the historian, and also some of our conservators. We do work, excuse me, around the windows and the doors and things like that. We get their opinions before we start to try to update it or fix things.
Now, you said you have all these properties. This has got to be one of your favorites.
It's a nice property to work on. It really is. And it's such a huge house compared to some of the other ones.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, John, so much for joining us and telling us all about the history of this house.
You're very welcome. Please come again.
We certainly will. And we'll be right back.
I'm Laura Fravel. I'm the curator at the Biggs Museum of American Art in Dover, Delaware, and I love the arts on the 302.
Welcome back. We are now in Winterthur's library, and we're here with Rebecca Palmer. She is the director of the library, to tell us a little bit about some artifacts that the Chandler family has given to Winterthur as part of their preservation and telling the story of this family. Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So talk to us a little bit about all of these artifacts. What do you think is the most interesting of the ones that you have in front of us?
That is a really hard question. I'm one of those people that I find something interesting in everything. So what's great about this collection, this actually just came into us. We met with a descendant of the Chandler family about a month ago, Edith Martin Chandler Can, who is the great-great-granddaughter of John Paulson Chandler, one of the last descendants of the Chandler farm to live in the farmhouse and to operate it as a working farm. So she brought really what is a wonderful, not only a family collection, so photographs and diaries and farm records, but records which also document the history of that farm over time. As a working farm, as a family who was deeply invested in this community, and who had really centuries of impact in this region. So we have some wonderful collections here. We have some great photographs.
I just love this one right here. Tell us a little bit about what we're seeing here.
Sure. So you are seeing two grandchildren of John Paulson Chandler in front of the Chandler farmhouse. We think this is about early 1900s, 1902, possibly. I don't have these children identified yet. That's something that we're working on, but it is just a great sort of visual example of the technologies that they were using, this great little carriage, trap carriage that they're riding in. A great visual example of what the farmhouse looked like for much of its sort of 19th and early 20th century history. And then we also have, you can see over here, this photograph of many of the actual Chandler descendants. So this gentleman right here is John Paulson Chandler, and this is his wife, Mary Martin. We have actually two families here. We have Mary Martin's brother, William, represented over here, and his wife. And then we have some sisters who lived as adult women in the house and sort of helped out with, the general operating of the household and the farm.
Now, was this back in the day whenever you had to stay still for a very long time to get a picture made? Because typically in pictures like that, when you had to stay still, the kids are always a little blurry because kids can't stay still. So
this is 1890s. So, we've largely moved away from that time period, in the 1850s and 60s where you really had to stay, very still for a long time. This is a little bit more candid. And actually, that's one of the things I love about that photo is that it's a staged photo. You're seeing this family. It's documenting the household that lived there. But it is a little bit, more comfortable. They're sort of sitting there in their great clothing. And
might
you're
that
seeing,
be a Sunday, you think? They're all in their best?
It's possible. I'm not sure. But you do see some of the children, the hats, the clothing. and then some of the workers, who worked on the farm and helped out.
Very inclusive. They were a very inclusive family.
They were, and they were associated with many of the Quaker communities around here. So that's something that I think we're interested in learning more about and trying to unpack is a little bit, who, not just the Chandler family, but who were all the people who associated with the Chandler family? What was that impact like?
Now, did you have a chance, you said there is a diary. Did you have a chance to look through this diary yet, since you just got it?
A little bit. So we have 2 farm diaries here. These are from Benjamin Chandler, so the father of John Paulson, from the 1830s. Look at that writing. So it's beautiful writing. I love this as a little, as artifactual evidence. So these journals were actually created for farmers, and so they have a lot of sort of farming iconography here. The great rooster on the back, and this farm, really cool. Poem or ode to a farm. They're meant, the size of them, so they're meant to be useful maybe as account books.
Right. But it looks like he's, instead of accounts, it's like an account of what was going on.
Exactly. So this is a daily diary.
So is there anything interesting in there that you thought were, wow, that kind of like surprised you?
I haven't had a chance to read through these all that intensively yet. One of the interesting things I find is that not only are they, documenting things like transactions and sales and the people that they're communicating with. They're also documenting the weather, and you get to see that change over time. And we found that scholars increasingly are very interested in looking at farmers' journals or farmers' logs for that kind of climatological, evidence, being able to use manuscripts to track scientific data, observational data over time.
Now, what is this right here? This looks like an almanac that maybe talked a little bit. Was it kind of like the farmer's almanac of the day?
Exactly. So these are little farmer's almanacs. They are produced by different publishers over time. So this is Banneker's Almanac, which is published out of Baltimore. And these were very cheaply produced. You can see that they're, a little bit tattered here. Heavily used by farmers to track things like the month, weather forecasts. It would often have information about, what the dollar was worth over time, trade, economic values. So it was really like a very handy little guide for farmers.
Absolutely. So you have a number of other books here. Are they all diaries or of like the farm itself, or do you get a glimpse into what life was like for, say, some of the ladies that lived there?
Unfortunately, that's not as well represented in these diaries or farm logs. We do have, interestingly, a couple of school board accounts. So the Chandler family was very heavily involved in the various school districts of Newcastle County, beginning in the early 19th century and continuing up through the late 19th century. And so we have great accounts of teachers that are being hired, how the school board is voting, what the education system looks like in Newcastle County at the time, and how that changes over time. So we have some, state regulations here, these digests of school laws that they're using and referencing. And then the decision-making is recorded in some of these volumes. So I think it's a great testament to how involved the Chandlers were, in this community outside of the farming, but also in religious organizations, in the school district. They owned a grocery store down the road.
Very influential people.
Very influential family.
Well, Rebecca, thank you so much for joining us, and
thank you.
Have fun going through all of this.
Thank you very much.
We'll be right back. You may not be able to visit Chandler Farm, but when you visit Winterthur, make sure you snap a few pictures and tag us on Facebook. Now, here are a couple of other things you might want to check out. For more information on any of the exhibits at Winterthur, you want to visit winterthur.org. That'll do it for this week's episode of The 302. Make sure you follow us on Facebook for more behind the scenes and extra web content. We're going to leave you now with a beauty shot of the grounds at Winterthur. Until next time, I'm Jackie Ferris. Tell them you saw it on The 302.